On my way to Symbolic World. Wow!
These things I didn't expect the world to just continue to become wilder and crazier, and also frightening, you know. And so there are definitely some frightening things that are happening around us, and we're not sure, you know, what the future is going to look like and what's going to happen. But one of the things we know is that all of us are embedded in stories, right? We're embedded in our own personal journey. We are embedded, of course.
Jonathan really undersold how the conversation went when we were planning all of this, because it was something like, you know, we're all talking on like Google Teams or Meet or something, and I said, well, you know, who should we invite for the, you know, summit 2? You know, we decided we're going to do this again. Who should we have? Jonathan's like, Father Josiah Trenham and Mary Harrington. And something broke in my brain a little.
In their scriptoria, books were preserved. In their hearts, the word, small w, and the word, big W, formed part of the same vividly coloured, embodied, sacred whole. For those monks in the last dark ages, toiling in their vegetable gardens, tending their bees, and praying the psalms, all of life was ordered towards the time and the silence needed to form a mind sufficiently ordered to contemplate the larger divine order of God's design. The printing press killed the art of Mary.
On the road, you will find yourself getting lost, being someone else, but you know, you will find yourself on the road.
Showed yourself to be qualified to become a member of my parish when you said, after I told you how something should be done, that you would forget it and not do it. Clearly you are a man of experience in the parish, living with a priest, yes.
He had a great sorrow come over him. The tears fell down his face. And he stopped. He looked back, knowing that he would probably never come home. And he made an oath. He made an oath to his mother. He said, "My mother, I promise you, I say these words before God, that I will not unsheathe my sword, that I will not dismount from my horse, that I will not even put a string to my bow."
There we go. All right. So, good afternoon, everybody. I have actually met all of you in person now because John, although I didn't see you at Symbolic World in Cleveland, I then went to your estuary in greater Cleveland, Akron area the following weekend because I had an unprecedented amount of visits to Cleveland in a 2-week time period. I went to go see a Guardians game with some friends of mine that had been pre-planned, and then I went back for the summit, and then the same friends I went to the baseball game with, their brother was having a bachelor party in Parma. So then I was there for that, and then I went with one of the bachelor party guys. I convinced him to come to Estuary with me at your estuary at the Panera Bread in Hudson that afternoon. So I have had IRL encounters with all of you, so happy for that. But yes, my name is Grant Moore, only 1 O, not 2. And I hail from Hillsdale, Michigan, which is the only county that touches Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. There's really no other way to explain where I live besides that. I learned about Estuary and Paul Vanderklay and Jonathan Pajot from one of my best friends years ago. I went to Mid-Estuary last year, and I went to the summit in Cleveland just week and a half, 2 weeks ago with all of you. and I've attended a lot of different estuaries. I'm actually going to see if I can pop into the Elmhurst estuary next Tuesday night. I have other reasons to be in Chicago at that time, so I'm going to see about that. But yeah, why don't we go to John next?
All right. Well, sorry, a little bit of cold. John Zepp is my name. I've been around lurking on the internet in internet spaces where they talk about Estuary, Paul Vanderklay, Jonathan Peugeot, Peterson, all that pipeline. Midwestray in Chicago was also the first event I went to. That's where I met Cory, among other people. And yeah, then after that, I was just inspired to start my own. It's kind of been the journey I've been on, trying to embody more stuff. You know, I spent a lot of time on the internet watching all these guys, learning all this stuff, and it's like, well, let's put this into practice. Let's make some things happen. So it was awesome that you were there, Grant. You and your buddy. It was a great time. It was a really good estuary we had one of our best, and I was happy to meet you.
Cory.
Sorry if I hear there might be some kid sounds in the background. I'll try to minimize. Yeah, good to see you all. Let's see. I guess my entry into this space started in probably around 2017 when we started listening to Jordan Peterson. We were on the Peterson, Peugeot, Vanderklay pipeline with a good bit of Vervaeke thrown in there. Yeah, I've been to most of the estuary conferences that have been in North America. I think all the ones that have been in the U.S., at least the major ones. And I went to Symbolic World Summit 2 years ago as well. We're big fans and supporters of the Symbolic World and what they're doing. And I guess we've been hosting Estuary. My family's been hosting Estuary for the better part of 4 years now, ever since Chino, the big Chino conference. And we've been doing stuff like this even well prior to that, whether through church. We've been doing a lot of small groups and Bible studies back from the time when we were Protestant. And we had Jordan Peterson discussion groups before we knew who Paul Vanderklay was. So that it was kind of like a natural progression for us to, it's the thing that we care about, big into hospitality and using that as a mode of healing and getting people to build community and stuff like that together. So it's kind of a natural thing for us to participate in the estuary movement, if you want to call it that. So yeah, Margaret and I, my wife, who's not able to be on the call because of aforementioned kid sounds in the background. She's very gracious to let me do this, but we were both at the summit last weekend and we enjoyed it a great deal. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about it. And we're coming to you now from Virginia. We are in Northwest Virginia, kind of closer to the West Virginia border, west of Washington, D.C. in the mountains.
Very pretty area. I've driven through there once or twice. Gerrit.
I guess in 2014, I was a student to be a teacher, middle school teacher. And that's when I found Peterson because my psychology classes were not sufficient and they were just lying about things. So I found an internet education on YouTube from this guy called Jordan Peterson who talked about big 5 personality traits and things like that, which was useful. And then I kind of watched him, go through the university corruption thing. And I was kind of experiencing that in parallel in my education. And so I followed that strand, encountered some cool people online, like Jonathan Haidt and John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry and Brett Weinstein, followed that Evergreen scandal thing, followed the IDW thing, and then, left that world for a while, just kind of let it stop paying attention to it, and then came back to start paying attention again to what those folks were doing, and then, found Jonathan, and Peterson kind of touched Jonathan with his attention, and, yeah. And then Vanderklay, Yeah, that's the same. It's the same pipeline as everybody. But I came in. I just wanted to say that I came in from like an educator background, and yeah, this is my first time dipping my toe in with you fine people in real life. So it's been really exciting. Really enjoyed the Symbolic World Conference. Yeah.
And Aram, I think you're next.
Yeah, hey everybody. Aram DeGennaro here, Harrisonburg, Virginia. It's great to meet all of you. Some of you I've met before, so it's great in person, which is really cool. I really like doing things in person when I can. And Grant from a couple of gatherings and from Hillsdale, so it's kind of interesting to have him invite me to be on a call that I have no idea what it's about. But I said, yes, I'll be on as long as I can. As far as how I got into these circles, well, I, during COVID, kind of came to the conclusion that society was falling apart, and in the process started reading a lot of political philosophy and then rewinding through a lot of centuries of human thinking and kind of rediscovering Christianity in a new way. Around that time as well, Jonathan Peugeot is an old family friend, so I started following him a bit more. And then with a couple of IRL friends going through Vervaeke's work, is kind of, cognitive science kind of integrates a bunch of different fields in ways that is difficult outside of theology to do. So I found that helpful. And then Jonathan told me about Estuary, and I looked at the speaker list and I was like, oh shit, I know these people. So went there and met some of you fine people.
And sorry, that was in Chicago, right, last year?
Yes, the Midwestuary.
Cool. And then whenever my friend hops on, I'm just gonna add him whenever we can just kind of do a little quick like speed intro with him. Cory, we had talked about you kind of being a moderator for the discussion today, kind of an estuary style reflection of the conference. So you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're already kind of one step into it because the protocol always starts with the introduction. So you handled that nicely. We all kind of know each other a little bit. We've at least met in person, which is neat. But round two always starts with the pitch. So everybody gets an opportunity to pitch a topic that's on your mind. We're here, we gathered kind of to debrief after the Symbolic World Summit. So related to that is best, but just whatever's on your mind, you can pitch to the group. And once everybody has an opportunity to pitch, we'll go around one more time and point. Everyone will point to someone else's topic that you're interested in. You can't point to your own topic. You have to point to somebody's topic. And we'll kind of use that as a way to weave our thoughts together, direct our attention to each other's thoughts a little bit. And that should be enough to set the tone to get the conversation going for those of you who are less familiar with the protocol. I think everyone's done it here at least once. So yeah, I guess we'll start with the pitch. Going clockwise as I see it, Gerrit, do you have a topic in mind?
Sure. This is my first estuary officially. Can I do two quick potential pitches?
Try to see if you can focus it into one, but
okay.
If two things kind of come up in your little synopsis, then I won't shoot you for it.
Okay, this is related to Mary Harrington's talk, and I guess my pitch would be a discussion about the utility of monasteries as a post-collapse kind of soil. I think that's about it. All I'm saying.
Short and sweet and very punchy. That's going to be hard to resist. All right. Grant, how about you?
I was, I think, quite taken mostly by Mary Harrington's talk, I think, as well. Particularly her point about memory and how hard it is to remember the more you outsource the storage of not only information, but the multifaceted meanings of a thing that you get through the entire like three-dimensional personal experience of your life. That information, only captures so far. That uh with the advent of the print and then the digital, we don't have a practice of recitation and recall anymore, because the need to do that has been so wonderfully relieved us of our estate, a la Francis Bacon, so that we can so that we can be liberated from the need to remember, which is its own kind of death. Um, I have continually come back to that point since the conference, just in my head, about how insanely important that is, and how even in the short total number of years I have been on this planet, I already have noticed my own capacity for uh, remembering and distraction to just be completely different than it was even 10 years ago. And it's completely tied to just how many pings and notifications and interruptions I have because of a digital world. And I'm personally, I was convicted by Mary's lecture. That was the word I kept coming back to, because I'm somebody who loves to be like with other people and outside of myself, so I do not prioritize reflection in the way that I ought. And so I want to talk about what is the place of re reflection and remembrance in our current time, and how like dire and desperate do we need to be to do that every day, like given our circumstances and giving ourselves grace to handle that where we are. What's the best way we can proactively, practically do memory work and remembering in our lives right now?
All right. Fantastic. Aram, you're going to be up next, and then John, and then me.
Yeah, are we allowed to pass?
Yeah, you can pass.
Yeah, I love the topics that have been suggested. I don't have anything to top that. I upvote all of them at this point. Oh, wait,
All
that's the
right.
next step. But
All right. Thanks. All right. John, do you got anything?
Well, what I had is really similar already to what's come up, but it was mostly Mary Harrington's speech hit me pretty hard. She talked about three singularities. One was the spread of the Greek alphabet, and then one was printing press, and then the third one is digital. And her solution for that was memory and literacy, as it relates to thinking back to the printing press, the previous one. And then I guess I'm what I kind of the mode I've been in for a while is when I go to a conference, I want to immediately translate into the idea of like, how then shall we live based on what we learned here? And so, I'm thinking in terms of those three singularities and how that's changed things, and then how can we live in such a way that we navigate through those things. And I think Mary was suggesting that we use memory as a way of, reaching back to the previous one and drawing something through, creating like a through line or something along those lines. Not in her words, but so I guess I'm just kind of thinking similar to what the other guys were thinking, that, you know, how do we use memory, or how do we embody the next thing to navigate through what comes next?
Nice. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Brent, welcome. It's nice to meet you.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me? That's the
Can
question.
you Can hear you just fine.
Yes.
Great. Wonderful.
So
Sorry,
let,
I have a
go ahead.
wonderful I have a wonderful 3-year-old that I took to the park today, and the timing just turned out that I was with her for the last hour, and the passing of the child took a little bit more time than we thought. So here we are. But
No worries at all. So are you familiar with the Estuary protocol already, Brent?
yes, I am quite familiar.
Okay, sweet. So we already did round 1, and we're most of the way through round 2, but we'll just real quick, you want to introduce yourself, and we'll do a 10-second popcorn intro for everybody.
Sure. 10-second intro. My name is Brent Townley. I am good friends with Grant Moore, who I believe is somewhere on here. I'm on my phone, so I don't actually have I can't see everyone's faces quite yet. I'm finding a good spot to sit down. But I am from Newberg, Oregon, and I really wanted to be at the Symbolic World Summit, but it's a long ways out from where I'm at. So yeah, I was invited by Grant to come and join in on the Estuary meeting. I'm part of an Estuary group in Oregon, in Portland, and this is kind of a treat. So that's
nice.
That's me.
Fantastic.
Brent got me into PVK, into Estuary, into Pajot. So like, you have this man to thank for me getting to the point where I arranged a call like this and met all of you. So
the seeds continue to spread. I love it. Brent, who leads your Estuary in Portland? If you don't mind my asking.
It has been a while, I believe. Let me see. His name. It's been a couple months now, so I'm trying to remember his name. Give me a second. I can pull it up, and then I can give you that information in a couple moments. But
I was just curious. It's not super important.
Yeah, they recently even changed locations. We were meeting at like a coffee shop in Portland and in like southeast Portland, but now it's, I believe, somewhere else because that coffee shop is no longer in the same location. So, but
well, you're having a battle for the weirdest estuary ever because Austin is having their estuary meetup right now. So Austin and Portland, you can go at it. I guess Santa Cruz is pretty weird too. I don't know which is the weirdest. Anyway, just a quick recap of who's who. Gerrit.
I'm Gerrit from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I want to talk about Mary Harrington's presentation.
Grant, you already know Grant. We'll skip him. Aram. I think Aram is multitasking here. We'll go with John while Aram comes back.
I'm John Zepp, Northeast Ohio. Conference was right in my backyard. I have a local estuary I facilitate, and was most interested in Mary Harrington's conversation about the 3 singularities, and then how do we live next, considering that.
Sweet. And I'm Cory. Nice to meet you. We're coming to you from Northwest Virginia now. We've been hosting Estuary for the better part of 4 years, and things like Estuary for much longer than that. So we're deep in it. Most of the people here in their intros said they went through the Peterson, Pajot, Vervaeke, Vanderclay pipeline, as is most common, with some minor variations, but common theme. So just briefly, the Gerrit wants to talk about Mary Harrington and the utility of monasteries as a post-collapse kind of rich soil. Grant also wants to talk about Mary's talk, especially about memory, how convicting it is, about how the way we live. Aram passed because he liked everyone else's topic so far. John also wants to talk about Mary's talk, with special emphasis on how then shall we live, given what she kind of revealed. If Francis Schaeffer could be turned into a verb, Schaeffering the moment. And that's where we've finished up so far. I also love the topics that are on the table, but I want to throw in I think we're already getting a sense of where it seems like the group wants to go, but I'm gonna sprinkle on the top here. Um, right before the conference and in the days following the conference, there's been some controversy on the interwebs, so I hear. I quit Twitter, so I'm very thankfully, not exposed to it quite as much. Yeah, exactly, Grant. um, but it's still, I've still been following it a little bit with Substacks, and some people are talking about it, and it strikes me the distinction between what I experienced at the Symbolic World Summit with how everyone was together and everyone was very focused and interested on the same things. Um, and even though, there was probably an outsized participation of Orthodox Christians, there was a good number of Catholics, there was a lot of Protestants, and there were some people. Um, I imagine there were some non-Christians there as well. I think most of the people I talked to were Christians, but just the sense of unity that I sensed there, and kind of the sense of hope and belonging that it gave me, even while people weren't, they were still very solidly in their doctrinal camps, and yet uh, it was a very hopeful, positive kind of experience, and it clashed pretty harshly with what I've been seeing on the internet, even with some of the surrounding some of the same people that we were interacting with in person. Um, and just, I guess I've been reflecting on what the difference is between those things. And I think, I'm not going to start the weave yet, but I think that could add maybe some flavor to the other things that we're wanting to be talking about here, about particularly in the realm of what's coming next and how then shall we live, I suppose.
Cory, could you summarize what you thought the conflict was?
It's not a single conflict. I think so, particularly in the Orthodox sphere, I think there's been controversy and disagreement amongst the online Orthodox in particular, as distinct from what people would talk about the in-person parish level, or even just personal level Orthodox world, of how there have been accusations flung, shall we say, against some people in the Orthodox world who are now using, call it, modern methods and modern technology to get the word out on Orthodoxy and to promote it, as being against what Orthodoxy actually is. And I'm paraphrasing here, so I'm sure this is not a perfect conception, but the accusation is that actually goes against the personal, in-person, slow, non-technological aspects of Orthodoxy, which are supposed to be grown into and conformed to, which is precisely the opposite of what you actually see manifested on the internet. And there's been some pretty awful stuff that's been manifesting itself around that in the conversations online in particular. So I hopefully that answers your question there a little bit.
Are you talking about the controversy surrounding the Girls Gone Bible interview with Father Josiah Trenum?
Yeah, that in addition to some other things. Brent, do you have a topic in mind with all of that? You can be the last one to round out the pointing, or the pitching phase.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in on the Mary Harrington train. Not really knowing a ton of what she talked about, I'm honestly I'm kind of really wanting to be, or I want to hear secondhand, because I haven't really had an opportunity to explore much with Grant on her talk, as he felt really inspired by that. So that's a train of thought I really would enjoy. And from what he did share with me, one of the things that comes to mind is just the importance of the role of memory in our lives, and of telling of stories, the retelling and retelling and telling of things. So yeah, I'm just what's been on my mind is the importance of that in life, and how our modern technological world has so greatly limited our ability to tell good stories. It seems like the more and more we have a world around us capable of telling amazing stories, like the worse and worse our stories actually become. Like the more we have the ability to share these things and through different mediums and modes and more instantaneously, like just the worse quality it becomes. And kind of with that frame of mind, Cory, that you were bringing up of like, well, in this world where like Orthodox Christianity is coming into the West, but then like, does it take the means of the West to like become a part of the West? Or is this just yet another reminder of why like the modern technologized way of being ends up like limiting our ability to actually engage with meaning? I don't know, like I'm like, is it just is the natural course of things, the more technologized or the more techne enters our culture, that the stories themselves will just become less? I don't know. That there's my thing that I've been thinking about, but it's very big and broad. So
Yeah, yeah, and very germane to what we've already been bringing up. So I think it's going to fit right in. I appreciate that. All right, sweet. We'll go for round 3. Point to someone else's topic or something that you heard someone else say that caught your attention.
First, can I withdraw my suggestion? I don't want to talk about my thing, and there's a better thing. So, is that possible?
Well,
Is that allowed?
No, it's already out there. It's okay. The table's set. Point to what you're interested in.
Thank you.
Gerrit, who caught your attention with something that they said?
While Mary framed the problem, Heather is beginning to articulate solutions, and I like thinking about solutions and talking about solutions, and that's right in line with something I was thinking about yesterday as well at work. So
cool. Thank you, Gerrit. Grant, who caught your attention and why?
I have all 53 pages of my notes from the conference here, so I will turn to those if I need to. But now I'm also trying to.
So since they're in your book, they're not in your memory, right?
Hang on. The written word outsources memory. Mary Harrington, May 14th, 2026. Here I am. I mean, even she joked about how she, typed out her talk on her laptop. No, I'm all for trying to integrate these things together, but I also did like your pitch, Cory, because the the conversation of the how to apply and the practical aspect necessitates what I'm doing at home, what I'm doing in my community, what I'm doing locally, and not what I'm doing on my keyboard. So, I want to talk. I want to integrate basically all the pitches and just start weaving them all at the same time. So,
yeah.
Because most of us brought up Mary, I want to take the non-Mary pitches and see if they overlap. That's what I'm interested in.
Nice. Yeah, I dig that. I think that we'll be able to do that pretty organically. Aram, who said something that caught your attention?
Yeah, I mean, I see them all starting to merge together. I'm particularly interested in the question of what do we do, and we is maybe several concentric circles, like what's available to me, to my immediate sphere of influence, and also to the culture as a whole. And I think that the question, as people are saying, emerges from Mary's talks, particularly with reference to the way that memory and information processing is moving around. And I add information processing because I do a lot of work on artificial intelligence, the way that affects organizations. But then it also, I have to agree with John that this context of moving into a post-modern space where pre-modern, if you can call it that, I wouldn't call it that, but ancient ways of thinking and being are suddenly more available to us. They suddenly have more overlap with the way that we think, what we believe, and the way we interact with what we participate in. I think that brings us right back to the question of, okay, how do we live? Whether that's me, like what do I do in my meditation time in the morning and on Sunday morning, or what is available to a culture that has grown up in a post-memory and moving quickly into a post-processing mode of being.
Fantastic. Good stuff. Thank you, Aram. John, what do you want to point to?
Well, Grant had said, he talked about memory and he said the word remembrance, and that just really hung with me in multiple ways of just, I guess, similar to what other folks have said. But I was thinking in terms of even liturgy, there's a lot of remembrance and the value that that has. I remember my background is Catholic, and as a young man, I remember thinking back and pondering the idea that, my ancestors may have been through this same kind of ritual 1,000 years ago, and how meaningful that was to me. And then thinking about the future and how valuable that might be to carry that forward. But I think Mary, her talk about memory and how our memory has been so fragmented and continues to be so, that just, I guess I'm coming back to the value of remembrance in that way. So.
All right. Thanks, John. Yeah, for me, I'm on board with everybody else. I was also really struck by Mary's talk. The thing that came to mind, I think it was as you were talking about it, John, talking about the singularities and the how then shall we live. That's a question that is very central in my mind too, especially if you've got some kind of authority, like if you're a husband or a father, or you're in charge of people. These are questions of, if you have a responsibility that you can structure people's lives in a certain way, or you have, you're looked up to. I think these are very important things to think about. I have some thoughts that I think I'd actually like to run by you guys about some more pragmatic things that we can think about, and maybe get some feedback on that. And I also just want to add, hopefully this won't be like a whole separate rabbit hole, but maybe it's okay. As you guys were talking about Mary's talk, it's funny. I'm right in the middle of reading for the first time Canticle for Leibowitz. I don't know if any of you guys have read that, but it's amazing how spot on it is. And I also read Loris for the first time. I guess that was probably over a year ago at this point. But it's striking me how those two stories are kind of like parallel with each other. Like Loris strikes me as like a way into an old worldview, and it's a story in the ancient past that's like, from a very traditional Christian metaphysics, it's like entering into a whole different way of thinking, where memory and like the way that time works even is totally different from the way that we think about it now. And Canticle for Leibowitz, which is set in the future, and it's funny too, Loris is more Orthodox, Canticle for Leibowitz is more explicitly Catholic. But thinking about a future time when it's a much more modern kind of story set with a modern metaphysic, but still, and I've only read half the book so far. But these ideas of how memory can be retained and how it shapes the future, and the intentional decisions and non-decisions and just moments of trust that are involved in letting those things carry forward. So that was floating around in my head too, I think it was as you were talking, John, primarily. But I'm really interested in exploring the practicals of these questions for sure. Brent, what have you heard that you want to point to?
So, honestly, there's bits and pieces. I would say the thing that seems to be the thread that everyone's pulling at is the same direction I want to go. The how should we then now live kind of thread. Like what do you do with the information? This is what I'm hearing from people. Like, what do you do with this information now, knowing that life is this way, that the world is we are in a post memory, post oral, in a sense, world. And it feels like even pushing like a post literary world. Like, how do you live in a world like that? Is it worth living in a world like that? Do we need to be moving back? Or, yeah, like how should we then now live? And I don't want to overmuch it.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for the protocol portion. I feel like we've got a very solid sense of where we want to go as a group, and we can probably tie in all our little loose ends as well. But let's go. Who wants to kick it off with some thoughts?
Well, so would it help if for if I gave at least a recap of what like one of Heather's talk or Mary's talk, depending on how we want to start, because I can give you the high level bullet points of the thing, beginning, middle, and end in like 2 minutes.
Oh, raise your
Would
hand
that
if you
help?
want that.
Yeah, okay. I figured we might want to do that. Help us remember. Okay, so let's do Heather's
Remember,
talk.
embodied.
Yes, there you have no agency. So Heather's talk, she started by citing this book from the 70s called Ways of Seeing, and then in parentheses again as like her own addendum to that. And basically talking about the advent of the camera and photography and lenses and how that as a medium impacts the experience of all of the meaning contained in an image or moving images, to the point now where over 150, 200 years of camera technology, people now associate the imaged version of a story versus the oral or textual version of a story as the definitive version. Um, you know, Disney has somehow figured out that that's not entirely the case, and they have no problem figuring out how to make money from remakes, but in a sense that just further proves the point. It's just another abstraction from the original story. It's a live action version of an animated, whatever. So for people who don't know who she is, she's a chief illustrator for the Symbolic World Press, but she worked in Hollywood for like 20 years. She was a set designer for a lot of movies that had more of a fantasy bent. She worked a lot on the Harry Potter films. She worked for a lot of Disney IP stuff, like the Maleficent movies. When she went to art school in the late 90s, she was taught all about, postmodern art. And she had a series of all of these paintings and images that are famous over the course of the 20th century. Visual languages are shaped by cultural ideologies. That was something she quoted from that John Berger Ways of Seeing book from 1972. She would describe him as kind of a Marxist art historian. And probably the most famous instance of one of the pieces of artwork that she showed in her slides was this like taxidermied formaldehyde shark encased in this cube uh, like wall, and it was called the name of the piece, "The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living," 1991, by Damien Hirst. She cited a lot of this guy's paintings and sculptures, and how recently this guy, Damien Hirst, has actually started to take inspiration from religious art. Um, and then she started to look at inspiration from religious art when she was working on this old like Gothic cathedral set for this particular scene in one of the Maleficent live action remakes, the Angelina Jolie ones. And the direction that she was given from her like set designer boss was basically just to make this as English Gothic, whatever as possible, but also somehow like not super religious at the end of the day. But like then she learned you can't divorce those things when doing it in that style. And she found so much more beauty in that kind of art that it made her realize, hang on, what's going on here? We have this, I have this Marxist art historian guy telling me visual languages are shaped by cultural ideologies, maybe he doesn't realize how right he is in this context. And so then, long story short, she basically realizes that where the beauty is, the truth, the goodness, there it is also. And I think she had been raised either Anglican or Catholic in England, but was like nominally a Christian and then not really active in her professional life, and then basically became a Christian and converted to Orthodoxy. And then, of course, the tight Orthodoxy network probably got picked up by Symbolic World sometime later. So now she's working on designing these like mosaics and art in these chapels that are going to be built somewhere, I think, in the Isles, the British Isles. So she's the one who was really talking about how, like, hey, maybe postmodernism isn't so bad because at least it's giving us a kind of version of honesty, even if it's like not the most beautiful truth. But since that's what we're accustomed to now in our cultural language, you know, visual languages are shaped by cultural ideologies. How do I integrate this into a distinctly Christian, like, art patterns that we see in these embossings in these cathedrals or in the faces of Christ in this icon, and then getting into iconography. And that was her talk. Yeah, more or less.
John, I'm curious to know because you seem to be hinting from what you were saying that you had some thoughts about how you had some thoughts about using memory as a way to bring these sorts of things together. And I'm curious to know if you could expand on some of that.
Well, I think, you know, I'm a little bit older. I'm in my 50s, and I probably have a lot more memories and a lot more to tap to think about the future, you know, and just the idea of taking captive my memories and then using that for the future, whether that's with younger guys and being able to communicate my experiences, good or bad, with them. And one of the fun things I did at the conference was I went out to dinner with about 8 guys, and most of them were pretty significantly younger than me. We had a great time, and they're just such high quality people and such guys that are obviously engaged with life and wanting to live a certain way. And that was really hopeful to me. And I thought, you know, that was the first night, and it really kind of pivoted the way I thought about the conference from that point on. Was like, how can I give something? What can I bring from my life experience to the table for other people? And memory was a part of that. I was thinking in terms of like all of my experiences. I owned a business for a lot of years. I probably had 450 employees over the years or so. I've seen a lot of people and how they live, and most of them were young people. So I'm trying to think in terms of how can I be a resource? What can I bring just from my life experience? And then also, you know, the long memory of the tradition that we've been handed from our faith backgrounds. What can we tap there? And how can we use that? And it's just something that I've been pondering since then. I haven't come to a lot of conclusions other than some pretty obvious ones, but as far as memory goes, that's kind of where I was kicking around.
So maybe I'm going to toss something out to you guys. I'm genuinely curious to get feedback. Margaret and I have been talking since the event. One of the things, this is within the context of the so-called orthobro controversies, if I could label it. A big part of it seems to stem from how new converts, and this, so I'm Catholic, but Eastern Catholic, so like I'm not in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and my understanding is still very new. I'm still a new convert, so you know I include myself in this to some degree. New converts who are very interested in like the rigor of the tradition, and particularly having a rigorous prayer life has been really, really interesting to me. My wife likes to joke that if I wasn't married and if I had been Catholic, I probably would have become a monk. And it's like, there's maybe something to that. Fortunately, in terms of God's will, I was married before I became Catholic, but still I have these tendencies to want to bring in the tradition. And it's everything from just contemplative prayer as such all the way through to hesychasm. And it's actually you that made me think of John, outside of Orthodox and Catholic, Francis Schaeffer. If you actually read the stories about what he did at L'Abri, his family was super focused on hospitality and having conversations, very Estuary-like. I think of L'Abri as being very similar to Estuary and actually very similar to monastic life, but it was a family. Like he was doing this sort of thing with his family. And if you read his accounts, it was very clear that they focused everything that they did on a life of prayer. One of the things that I took as inspiration was that they kept a prayer journal. They were very explicitly, anytime they received a prayer request or anytime they had a prayer request, they would put it in the journal, and it would sit in the praying spot because they had a praying spot for their family. And each person, when they would be praying down there, either alone or together, they'd open up the prayer journal and they would pray through those prayer requests. And then they'd also have a record of, like, later on, they could look at that as like a record of what God had done in their lives, ways that prayers were answered or not answered. And that's still, I read about this years ago, but it's still convicting to me because I'm very guilty of like, oh yeah, I'll pray for you. And then, not think about a person for a long time afterwards and then feel guilty about it. But that kind of dynamic of, like, I feel like there's something we could dig into about how calling to mind people in your prayers and drawing on the traditions in the way that they were very intentional. Reading about Thomas Aquinas in the introduction of the book that Mary Harrington referenced on the Book of Memory, the whole introduction uses St. Thomas Aquinas as like his memory was insane and he contained whole worlds within himself. And it was centered on his prayer life. The book doesn't go into that quite as explicitly, but as a way of paying attention, and as you want to be really careful not to boil down prayer just to techniques, but there are techniques involved. It seemed like these things can grow up together in terms of a daily routine that's focused on other people, to like your point, John. If you're wanting to bring to bear what you contain within yourself and link it to other people's lives, it seems like there's a fruitful way that we can match that world, and in a way that's not the temptation of a lot of rigorous converts is to pretend that they were monks or wish they were monks, but they actually want to get married, and realizing that there's fruit to be born in having these two worlds be in tension with each other without trying to let one overwhelm the other in an unhealthy way. Something like that. I don't know. I'm floundering now. Somebody pick that up.
Yeah, well, what I hear you saying, Cory, is you're working at linking these things together with very real practices, and see how those practices then come back, or through walking the practices through participation, we are remade. Which, if we're studying in these traditions, we shouldn't be surprised that this actually happened. That actually happens, but then just sort of asking yourself, what's the not the right way to do this, but what are the ways of approaching it that lead us to the right destination? What are the ditches maybe on either side of that? It links to something that I thought about in looking back in my notes just now at Heather Pollington's talk. She talked about engaging with all these early visual art traditions, and then she said, I wrote down, this is as best I could, her quote. She said, I realized that I had been converted to a pre-modern version of Christianity. And I took it to be that through these practices of learning to see in a new way, see through some of these images, she fell into a world, and then she later discovered what that world was. I've had what she said. I realized I had been converted to a pre-modern version of Christianity. Like I'm pretty sure I've said that word for word, describing my own experience of the last couple of years. And I know other people that I'm pretty sure would say, yeah, that tracks. That's what happened to me. So this is what I would add to what you're saying is, yeah, we're concerned about praying, and we're concerned about praying right, and there's problems we get into and controversies and all this. And yet at the same time, this is something that's actually a powerful psychotechnology or a set of psychotechnologies, and it does change who we are. It changes the imaginative space that we inhabit, and we find ourselves in a different world.
Totally with you. The thought that comes to mind is I'm a huge fan of Vervaeke. I love, like, he's given me so much. And yet, this is just like, we can skip over this, I guess, if we want. But the thing that keeps coming to mind is whenever I hear prayer described as a psychotechnology, I kind of cringe, as I don't know what to make of that. Like, how do we keep it from being reduced to just a technique, and understanding that, even beyond just talking in cognitive science terms, in terms of a thing that opens you up, with the reciprocal opening, with your focal object being the infinite, which is beyond you, which you will never comprehend fully. I love that language. It's very useful, but I don't know. How do you feel about that as a Christian, I guess? Because I don't know if I'm totally comfortable with that language, and I don't know if I'd be totally comfortable using that language with somebody who is a Christian but doesn't have the cog sci.
Well,
I have something on that real quick. Or I think you need a wider definition of prayer. You are what you attend to. What do you focus on? The whole praying without ceasing thing doesn't necessarily literally mean that you're always in your closet praying 24 hours a day. What is it that you are giving attention and incorporating and taking into you and regurgitating? I think once you make it a little bit of a wider definition, that issue gets resolved a little bit. And then whoever I interrupted, sorry, go for it.
Yeah, and I would say we shouldn't over psychologize it, because prayer is solicitation of God. It can be like a kind of an incantation, like it's a literal. You're invoking. It's not a brain thing alone. Like, you're literally speaking to the one in whom we all live and move and have our being. So I did want to add on to what Cory was saying, and something he was touching on. There is a real utility in say an evening prayer, where you recall all the people you care about and you pray for them, and you ask for God's intervention on their lives in a positive manner. And the effect that has on you is very good. It helps you organize and prioritize who you should be thinking about, caring about, in your attention. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to point out the reality of prayer, which is that is a solicitation of God, ultimately. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
can be. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, it just reminded me of a story. My parents, being devout Catholics, they really developed in us as kids a strong prayer life. And one of the things we would always pray for is everyone in our family. And I come from a family, I'm the youngest of 8 kids. And so literally how I remember my siblings in the order that they're born is from the prayer as a child, because I would go down the names, from oldest to youngest. And there's a kind of an embarrassing story, but really interesting, because I knew my dad would pray. He told me he would pray every single night, and I believe that he prays for all of us. And now that they've had grandkids, this is a long prayer. There's like 50 people that he prays for. It also helps him to remember all their names, I'm sure. Because he's 93 at this point. So,
wow.
But one of my siblings got remarried, and during he was talking into a microphone at their wedding, and when he, I think he did the prayer before the meal, I think is what it was. And when he was praying, he said my brother's name, and then he said his first wife's name after, you know. And it was at his wedding. He was getting remarried to someone else. And of course, everyone was kind of confused there at the wedding, except for me, because I knew why he said that, because it just rolled off his tongue from praying every single night. He prayed for my brother and his wife, even though they were divorced. I'm sure he still prayed for her, you know. And it was an awkward moment, but to me, it was like a secret. I had like a secret knowledge. Like I knew why my dad did that. And I thought it actually was a virtue, even though it was an embarrassing moment. And so that's something that I've kind of tried to carry forward from my parents, as far as it goes to memory, but it also, you know, plugs in with prayer, and it helps to, you know, get me out of my own way, help me think about other people, which is something I frustratingly still struggle with at 54. Thinking about myself too much. But anyway.
Something I have to say right now is that, like, I'm holding back tears listening to John's story, and I want to just point out, like, the ability to do what John just did is part of what we're talking about, which is to recall and, you know, tell a personal story about a thing. Like yesterday, I asked some kids at the place I work to tell me, you know, their favorite chorus to their favorite song, their favorite poem, or tell me what happened yesterday or last week. They can't do it. They can't do it. It's like a someone said in this conversation, we're in a post-literate, and it's not post-literate, it's post-competence, it's post like recall, and that, I don't know, I just like the beauty of John's. I think that's what's at stake. Like, that's what's going to be rare. It's going to be rare to be able to do something that seems that simple, to just say that story. I don't know if that makes any sense.
So there's a couple of things that come to mind for me for that, or on that strain of thought. One of the things, Gerrit, do you work at a school?
No, I work at, you can picture like a YMCA with an evangelical twist. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I work with middle schoolers. I'm a 7th and 8th grade teacher. And I'm at a Charlotte Mason school, if any of you are familiar with Charlotte Mason. But one of the things that one of the things that we really, really emphasize at our school a ton, most people would think I'm headed in one direction, but the big thing we have here is gratitude, and the massive importance of orally sharing gratitude, like with each other in a classroom, like in the classroom environment. And so at the end of each day, before we enter into our time of prayer that ends our day, we have a period of gratitude in which we look back over our day. What are we grateful for from this day? And it's not just, I'm grateful for Spanish. No, like, tell back about that thing. Tell about it. Share what it is that you are so grateful for. And so it's a really hard practice for middle schoolers, as they just want to get through it as fast as they possibly can. I'm grateful for math because it's fun. Well, tell us about what you learned in math today. Like, what is it that you're grateful for about that math lesson today? And they have to, okay, I'm going to. But then over time, like, you go through the year and they know that it's coming and they start to think about these things. And over the year, you begin to they begin to realize in themselves that they're capable of returning to that joyful thing, sitting in it, getting to appreciate it, getting to share it once again with their classmates. And you can see the smiles on the other classmates' faces. Yesterday was our last day of school, and we had a little bit of an extended gratitude time at the end of the day. And it was like, from the whole year, think back on the whole year. Like, what are you grateful for from this year? And I had one particular student go back to the very first day of school and tell about a very specific thing that happened on that first day of school that like completely changed their perspective on how this year was going to go. And everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And like the looks on their faces of like, "Oh, that's right." Like that was a point of the year where we were all idiots that day. Like, and they all just kind of went down that road of like, what were we thinking? But just getting to see them relive that, it's like the power of remembering through gratitude shapes who we become. And if we, it's something that I think our culture has definitely let go of like taking time to appreciate what has already been, to give gratitude and to share that with others, is huge. And it really shapes not just you but the people around you, because oftentimes your gratitude is something that they've shared in that they've forgotten, or it is them, and it surprises them, like, "Oh, you're actually grateful for something I did?" Like, whoa. So yeah, and in a way prayer is this as well. And so I think there's something like, one of the things that is at the core of prayer is gratitude for what the Lord has done for us. So yeah, like but we often skip over that part. We often go straight to what we need or what others need. But to just stop and be grateful for what is and what has been. But I see a hand.
Yeah, I just need to let you guys know I love what's happening here. Appreciate it. I need to get off and go do some stuff with my family. Thanks for inviting me, Grant. Thanks for letting me join. And encourage you. I'm glad we're talking about prayer, but make sure you steer it back to the rest of life. Remember, it's easy to see this is spiritual, but let's not allow there to be a divorce. The whole point is incarnation. So
Thanks,
take care.
Aram.
Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Aram.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe I'll jump off with what he just said, because man, I'm sorry to lose him, so I want to hear more what he has to say about this. But what I was listening to you, and maybe this is what you were indicating, Brent, when you said people are expecting you to go one way. The way I was expecting you to go was narration. Thought you were going to focus on narration, but then you said narration anyway. Like, you said it in a, like, do you realize what you're blowing my mind right now? So we're starting to homeschool our kids, and we love Charlotte Mason. What you're describing, because for those of you who don't know, in the Charlotte Mason, one of the methods of pedagogy, I guess you would say, is as teaching kids how to think, how to relate to things, and in fact developing their memory specifically by means of what's called narration, where you read to them a story, or you just tell them a story, and then you stop and you tell them, "Okay, tell me back the story that I just told in your own words." And it's really difficult for little kids to do, but it is as far as I know, it's a highly effective method of just teaching basics of memory, and it's in the form of a story. But what's been really significant to me, listening to Vervaeke and Peterson and Pajot and all these people, is about how, like, you actually in some sense consist of those stories, and reality consists of those stories, certainly in the way we experience them. And so when you tell me that you have periods of essential gratitude where what you're doing is you're having them pick something that actually happened and narrate it back with an actual focus towards gratitude, what you are doing, yeah, you said it shapes you and it shapes the people around you. And by the way, this is exactly the point of Estuary and the Estuary protocol. In miniature, like you pitch things, like what you're kind of doing there in round two is you're exposing a part of yourself. And usually the way that I'll frame it when I teach people the protocol is you should only pitch things that you're genuinely interested in, that you're thinking about. And so what you're actually sharing when you pitch something like that is kind of a deep part of yourself. It's a little bit vulnerable. It's a little bit personal. Sometimes it actually is like a deep personal aspect of your life. And then round three, if it's done properly, what you're doing is having people narrate something that they heard from somebody else. You're calling it to attention and you're validating. Like there's all sorts of ways that this has kind of been weakened by our this language is weakened by our psychologized society. But truly you're validating and calling to attention for everybody your alternate perspective on something that they did, which maybe even is revealing something to themselves. Like it's an incredibly powerful force. And I think that you're exactly right, that this kind of is prayer, and it maybe is a, and you want to be careful with that, right? But like, I think of prayer as being something very similar, and that it is something that should be integrated into daily life. Like there is a sense in which just the way you live out your day-to-day life, to Ram's point, in the practical sense, should be a prayer. And what I think a lot of people struggle with, and what I occasionally struggle with when I want to like do my super rigorous prayer routine and try to develop the perfect habit and be the navel gazer, touch the uncreated light or something. That's what a person with a vocation to family needs to understand, I think, is that when you are interrupted in your prayer, when you are interrupted with whatever you want to do, that's a call to give. Uh-oh, we lost Gerrit. That means I'm probably talking too long. It's a call to give your attention to this person, this tiny person who needs your attention, who needs you to narrate what you see in them, which in a sense gives them the ability to come into being. Like really, it's that's how you give them love, is by giving them
Right.
attention. And then it teaches them to be able to do the same thing, especially if you make them emulate to some degree what you're demonstrating. So that I just thought that was absolutely beautiful, Brent. I'm on the edge of tears right now listening to you as well, because that's everything. Like that's what we do here. That's what we should be doing. It integrates the prayer, it integrates the memory, and it links us together. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna stop.
Well, and Grant, you mentioned something earlier. You used the phrase, and actually, I think you and I have talked about this before, of like you are what you give your attention to, or you become what you give your attention to do. I think to some degree that is the first part. But like one of the things that's so key in truly like in the formation of a person is the like yes the attending to, but then the I don't know if there's any other better way to put it than to like the to play with that thing, or like or to I don't know if play is correct.
Maybe circle.
Yeah, so to be able, so it's kind of there's a mixture of things that are involved. So we attend to something, say a book. We're reading a book, and there's the first step is to give our attention to it, right? To give our focus to it, allow it to enter in. And but the problem with that is it'll go out just as easily as it goes in. And what needs to happen is for us to digest that. And like, what does that digestion process look like? And I mean, as you mentioned, it looks like narration. It looks like telling back. It looks like appreciation, giving gratitude for what you have received. It looks like play. There's an aspect of play involved. Now that I have this thing, what can I do with it? So like when we're developing a lesson for our classroom, we have a process. We have what we call the first little talk. The first little talk is a thing where we at least set things up for them to, or in order to maximize the potential for attention. What does the student need to know in order to be able to enter into this text today? Like, what are some key terms, ideas, and things, so that like all of the stuff that might stop their ability to be able to attend, we get out of the way. But it's called a little talk because the focus is the text. Let's get in. So, okay, now let's give our attention, and we're practicing giving our attention. Then we jump straight into narration. Books close, tell back. From there, right, we might go back to more reading, or we might turn to the next thing, which is the second little talk, which is, okay, let's play with this thing, right? So now we have an idea that you've just told me back, and now we have an open-ended question that allows us to kind of explore the ideas of the text, or discussion. We might call it discussion, right? But in other modes, not just a book, it might be like we're learning a new math concept. And so we've got this new math concept. We've given our attention to understanding the basic ideas of the concept. Well, now we need to play with it. Here's a few different kinds of problems with this idea in it. How do we solve these problems? Let's try a few different ways. So thinking about that, like in the line of the role of like memory in our world, and like how we are formed and who we become, giving our attention is at its core like vital and important, but we're also like sure, we need to grow in attention, but we are incredible consumers. Like our culture is incredibly good at consumption. Like we allow our attention to be pulled at all the time. There's, I think, a lot to be learned about how we give our attention rather than have it be drawn away from us. But I think an even deeper thing that our culture really struggles with is the next two steps of that, right? Is how do we tell those things back? How do we share that gratitude? And then also, how do we play with that thing rather than just consume it? How do we build upon it, or in a sense, love it? I guess that's a way that a word that could be used there. Yeah, just some thoughts there.
Well, you're playing back into Mary's talk. If you remember, she had a section.
I wish I was there, but
sorry. Oh, well, how about that?
Do go. Please tell.
You played right into it anyway. She had a part where she spoke about rumination and how memory lives in the belly. She said, and then she talked about the monasteries, and there's a lot of, in the old text, there's a lot of talk about grumblings and visceral analogies and things about the gut and the heart and things like that. So going beyond just the mind, it's kind of what you're saying, like something draws our attention and our mind latches onto it, but then you're saying it's got to go down and live in the gut and be embodied, and she talked about that a fair amount. She talked about verbiage like the sweetness of understanding is like sweet honey and things like that, and you find that in a lot of those ancient texts. I just thought that was interesting that you kind of played right into what she spoke about.
Brent, it's really cool that you're a teacher, and it's really cool that you've shared, how these things are going on in your classroom, because this is exactly where my mind went when Mary gave her talk, which was, I think the answer is about formation, and it's about teaching, and it's about children. And I went to a more recreational spot just because I'm not a teacher now. If I were still a teacher, I'd be in the same lane where I'd say we got to do this stuff in the school. But I had kind of a whimsical idea. I'm going to share that with you guys real quick, if you don't mind, which is that there's a gazebo at the park where I live. And there's a lot of these gazebos everywhere. And it's right across the street from a venue where they do a weekly talent show, open mic night. And what the open mic night kind of becomes is a showcase of creative work, original poems and songs. But they also say that it's open to everyone. And so it kind of, when things are open to everyone, what that really means is it's not for children and it's not for families. So there's going to be crass stuff, and there's going to be swearing, and there's going to be it can be ugly sometimes. But when I showed up to this thing, I thought this will be, this is a pretty conservative town. Maybe this will be like a showcase of people playing violin or something. That's not what it was at all. But what I was thinking for the gazebo, and this is in my imagination totally, is like a version of that. And it's not a talent show. It's like just a little showcase, like 3 to 5 minutes of a kid doing a memory task. And it would just be, the rules would be beauty and memory. I guess that would be the theme, beauty and memory. So you could do like a little tea, what do you call those things where you do like a tea ceremony? You could do like tea ceremony. You could do a little violin piece of something you did not write. It would have to be non-creative because that's not what it's celebrating. You could do like a short, like 2 or 3 people could do like a little theater, thing. But they'd just be like these kind of lightning fast showcases of, other people's creative work where kids have to use their memory and skill and practice to do this. And then, applause and cheering and, just like a lightning positive reinforcement kind of environment where people dress up and they do this, and that, just kind of a fun thing. But that's just I don't know what you guys think about that, or if that's related to the topic at all. I don't know. What do you think?
I wrote it down, and I'm 100% going to find a way to do this in my community. That is
cool.
Such a brilliant idea. So it's interesting because I grew up playing music. I grew up playing piano in particular when I was younger. And some of my worst memories are botched recitals when I was a really little kid and I was new to it. And I would be in the middle of playing a song and I would just forget and just stop. And everyone's watching. And it's like, I have this block in me. Like, I've gotten much more comfortable with, I don't mind public speaking. But even with music in particular, I still have these memories that kind of hold me back from that kind of participation that you're talking about. And it strikes me that especially for little kids, it could be such a wonderful thing to build up that kind of experience. And it's not, even in bite size, like what you're describing, like little lightning performances or showcases, that's not like the shortness of it doesn't decrease the meaningfulness of it. Like that's, especially if it's a piece of art that you've taken the time to memorize, even if it's a short little poem or like a short little music piece or a song,
a proverb,
a proverb, totally. When you stand up and you become the embodiment of that thing, even for 30 seconds, and then stopping and have people in the audience respond to it for a little bit, more than even just applause is enough by itself, but to almost do like an Estuary round 3 thing where you have some people just talk about the beauty that they see. I could see, to me, I've got fireworks going on. I'm 100% going to organize something like that for my kids and maybe for other people.
So now my brain's going too, but so what this brings to mind for me is a little thing I did in the Boy Scouts of America, which is not unique to them, but we were taught, handed down from the older boys in our troop who were taught this, specific skits, with stories. Most people know skits these days, unfortunately, only through things like Saturday Night Live or sketch comedy. And it's not all, bad. Obviously, there's some really good stuff out there. And part of the, good comedy is freedom and looseness, right? But for 11 to 15-year-old boys, if they're handed down this thing that's like pre-guaranteed to be funny and they
Mm.
execute it well, it's like the best thing in the world. So
Mm.
I still remember to this day, like specific skits that have, stories and humor, and it teaches you about like what makes something funny. And I remember them to this day, and I have like the Google Docs of the scripts of a couple of them. And it's also like it's a memory for my family because I also kind of did these with like my brothers. Um, and I mean, that's what we're kind of describing is what something like a theater tries to get at. I mean, there's other like
Mhm.
technical and aesthetic considerations going on there, but I mean, we saw that Deacon recite that entire folktale at the summit as well, with accompanied by music, and he did it all from memory, and that was impressive.
Mhm.
But what you're talking about, I mean, at my at my preschool graduation, I read the entire story of George Washington and the cherry tree, like to the audience of all the parents, and this is like a core memory for me. This was this was impressive at the time because I don't think anyone in my class could read the whole story, and because I taught myself how to read when I was like 4.
Mm.
So, and we have this on like VHS camcorder somewhere in our basement, but like stuff like that is quite good. Um, and the skit thing, like obviously the Boy Scouts of America as an organization have a very controversial recent history, but when they were started 100 years ago, like they weren't completely divorced from a sense of there is almost a liturgy of the hours kind of aspect to the agenda of a camping trip. Like, especially if you do these like
Wow. Yeah.
no,
Cool.
no, no,
Yeah.
let's keep going with
I
this.
love that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There's an aspect of um there were these other kind of like extracurricular things within the Boy Scouts of America that were like extra things you wanted to do. It was called the Order of the Arrow, where basically there's a lot of like ties to Native American stuff, and it doesn't get super hokey, but it basically you have like a night vigil, and you do an entire day where you have like a vow of silence when you do your first like weekend ordeal to get your stripe in the Order of the Arrow, which is this like, as I said, extra thing that not all Boy Scouts do. Be you can be nominated and you can go and you can do this. Where does it get this from? Like the whole idea of a vow of silence and vigils and like walks and leave no trace and like principles of, you know, good camping and what your relationship is to the environment. In the last, 20 years or so, when you have no idea where all these things come from in the Boy Scouts, then maybe these things can kind of supplant them in their place and can be, you know, more or less described as maybe something uh super earthy or hippie or progressive. But I think that's short-sighted of like the long, 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 long tradition of why people in communities do these things when they travel, when they camp. I mean, and how they remember where they are, Hansel and Gretel leave breadcrumbs, like there's so much you could do in terms of the actual like the epic of the being out in nature and what that does for forcing you to have memory. We have to learn how to use compasses and do orientation in a physical geographical space, that has mathematical rules and things like that. But like I was so glad I did that in middle school and high school. I was also spoiled. I grew up in Oregon, so like how could you not go camping? But um and I'm only just now realizing this for the first time talking about this on this call, guys. But in a way, like Boy Scouts was teaching me what like liturgy was on our camping trips and how you planned, and this is how wet it's going to be outside in the morning. When you get up, this is when you need to make food. This is how hot it's going to be. This is what you do if you see scat from a deer. It's like it's not all just uh learn these things and you'll be good at these things, but toward what ends? Like I get merit badges toward what end? It's not just because I'm nerdy and they're cool. I can actually use these in a context, in the woods, on a lake, in the snow. Like it was obvious where the outlet was. No one knew, no one needed to ask. So I think for everybody that's encountering all of these wonderful ideas about beauty, goodness, and truth, it's not necessarily obvious to them where the bubble is for that if they're not necessarily like churched people, or if they've grown up in church their whole life and that has become its own, bell that rings without love, right? So this conversation about like local presentation thing got me thinking about Boy Scouts. So sorry for the long bit there.
I love that's your narration is recalling to mind beautiful things that I hadn't thought about for probably 15 years. That's amazing. Thank you for that. And what's going to me after what you just finished there, like how people without a religious background or people who maybe haven't been in Boy Scouts or something like that might not know outcome or intent. And again, we want to be careful not to instrumentalize things, but this is where the cognitive science language for me has been really helpful, where you can actually show that your capacity to be in relationship with things or people, and if you're a Christian, to ultimately to be in relationship with God, there is a building block approach of skills, and that requires these patterns, these rituals, these liturgies, whereby like learning how to narrate is the first step to learn how to give and receive love, like on a really fundamental level. And I know this to some degree from personal experience, but also from, there's some really sad research out there on what happens to people when they don't receive kind of those basic building blocks when they're kids, and how it kind of wrecks their capacity to really be in relationship. Like, and I mean just very basic relationship. Like they literally don't have the capacity to receive when people are trying to love them. And if you know anything about how devastating and hopeless that situation feels like to be in, my goodness. And then when you realize that things like doing Estuary, as simple as like pitching something and then responding to someone else's pitch, like you're doing that ritual, you're giving them a little tiny bit of growth to learn how to see and feel when somebody's trying to love you, and you're learning how to do it for other people. Like that's to me, that's like so core. It's like a building block for everything.
And I think to try and tie this back to the Heather Pollington thing, with it would seem like after talking about this for an hour or so now, I think Heather's contribution is what is the mode of these things? Because the thing that was calling her up to Christianity was like the mode and the expression of the art. You can have this kind of like local performance talent show concept we're describing, and maybe it's not a gazebo, and it's just like something that's not really as functional or beautiful, or something that draws you away from the thing that the demonstrations are trying to draw you into. So maybe the way we integrate Heather's ideas is just being extremely conscious of how the physical like spaces we're doing these things in orient us to what the process of memory is directionally trying to get us to go to. It's hard to think of anything that would really get in the way of that. It's so simple of a concept, right? But maybe that's how we can kind of incorporate that because I do want to find how this ties back in. But tell me if I'm wrong. I think what her contribution has to do here is the what mode the thing is in.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody
I
has
think
more to
that's
say about
right.
that. Mm.
I'd also say like the thing about I love the geometry of Heather's talk, and like honestly, her talk really unlocked something for me. Um, because I have like a music background, but I have very little background in appreciating visual art, but my wife does, and so she's been working on me for years to be able to receive it. Um, and I've grown, but during Heather's talk, something clicked for me to where I felt like I was actually able to receive the beauty of a visual medium just in listening to her talk. Because what it linked for me was when you're looking at visual art, perspective is such a key aspect of it. And all art, you might say, is trying to reveal the thing behind the thing, right? So it's trying to make us able to be in relationship or to perceive invisible realities through a visible medium. Um, and when you think about like imagine an object like in a 3D space, it's an object that you're trying to get a handle on, but that's the invisible thing, that's the spiritual thing. And you really only have your perspective from which you know it. So you have your language, you have your art, you have your perspective, whatever it is that you can try to express. But then when you enter into dialogue with somebody else, a different person who has a completely unique perspective, whether it's whatever their medium is, whether it's prose, poetry, art, music, trying to express that same spiritual reality, you can represent that graphically by like imagining a physical object in a room. And I've got my perspective from this direction, and someone else has a different perspective necessarily from mine. And I think part of the tyranny of the Enlightenment approach, the post Renaissance approach, it seemed like there's this narrowization to where you want to narrow it to just my perspective, just like my whole head is just the eye. And it's almost like a tyrannical no, you have to see it exactly the way that I see it, or else we're not really communicating. But what that actually does is it destroys the play that Brent was talking about. And it actually destroys the reality of the way that we actually enter into relationship with these things through dialogue, which is by I have my perspective and I'm going to be as honest and true as possible in my expression of it. But I must know what your perspective is in as honest a way as you can express it, because that way you're actually getting a fuller realization of two different facets of this invisible thing. And like taking the post-Renaissance approach is actually a destruction of that. And so it was beautiful to me to realize that by even just expressing a different art form that didn't narrowize, I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, the perspective of it to where you actually are in reality seeing it from multiple perspectives as you move around the room and the icon seems to be looking at you from all directions, or like you're inside the cathedral and it seems actually bigger on the inside than can possibly be contained from looking at it from the outside. These kinds of experiences are expressions themselves of the reality that we're talking about, and the dialogical reality, I guess, of trying to explore a thing together with somebody, and not this mode of, it's really just destroying the other, I guess. It's something like that.
Hmm. Can I give a real life example of how a change in mode and like has real life implications on something? I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Okay. Brent knows exactly what I'm about to talk about if he knows me at all. So, let's see. Can you see my screen? Can you see this?
Yep, there it is.
Yes.
Okay. You're probably wondering what this is.
I knew this would make its way eventually.
Well, I'm not, because it has a label on it there.
Yeah. So, okay. So Brant and I play this wonderful game called Town Ball. And this was created by a math teacher in 2012 in Fresno, California with his students. This teacher his name is Daniel Jones, but we all call him Jones. So Jones grows up, plays baseball, loves it, tries to play in college, breaks his finger, misses tryouts, no baseball for him. Gets a math teaching job. There's a very, big diverse population at the school. They love cricket. They play cricket for years and years. Cricket has no foul territory like baseball does, and there's a lot of other things about it that are, a little more freeing and loose than the very tight, boundaries of baseball. Cricket's going well. Jones's boss is like, we need another sport in the off season. And Jones is like, well, I've been wanting to see if there's anything that has ever existed in history in a bat and ball context that has both the base running aspect of baseball, but then also the kind of open-mindedness of cricket. And what he and his students found was this, which I have now scrolled up here. So this is an 1858 rule set of a bat and ball game from Massachusetts. It's not a diamond. It's just a normal square. You throw from the middle and, you run around all those corners and then you get home. I don't think there was any foul territory in this game. You could throw the players out by just hitting them with their body while they're running. It was a little more reckless, a little more hobo, if you will. And baseball at the time was not, as we understand it now, it's super respectable. It was kind of the ne'er-do-wells kind of activity,
So it originated in the Sandlot for real.
If for real. So what we have today comes from New York. New York was like, we're gonna be the gentlemanly option, and we're gonna have foul lines. We're gonna make sure, everybody is, dotting their I's and crossing their T's, going to this base and then that one. And we can smoke our pipes and wear our suits and say, yes, sports. Isn't this great? And then what's so ironic about that, of course, is mainstream sports over time are nothing but that. But that's another conversation. This was the runner-up option. One of the reasons this fell out of vogue, other than the fact that, New York is New York and they have more people and better marketing and better athletes and better everything, was the fact that the geometry of this game wasn't really that suitable. Everything in the New York game with the diamond, everything's in threes. There's this kind of mathematical perfection to it, and it's beautiful. So in the process of playing the Massachusetts game now back in 2012 in Fresno, California, Jones and his students, they loved this game, by the way. It felt very new to them. But they were then wondering, how would this game have developed over the whole 20th century if, in an alternate pattern of events, this became the national version of baseball? And what they came up with was this. So the reason why these have shaded areas, they don't really mean anything for actual gameplay. But so what you're looking at is the golden ratio. You're looking at the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio, both represented arithmetically and geometrically. So the distance between the base paths are all Fibonacci numbers. So 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 88, so on and so forth. These are all the numbers in the sequence. If you don't know what this is, it's all the numbers prior in the order. They just added to the one in front of it, and the sum of those two is the next number in the order, right? Because 5 plus 8 is 13, 8 plus 13 is 21, so on and so forth. 42 feet to first base, 68 to second, and 110 to third are all just twice 21, 34, 55. Those are all Fibonacci numbers. So the difference between the Massachusetts field and this is they just added a fifth base. That was it. You start in the middle, you go out to the side at first, and then to second in the upper right corner, and then third in the upper left, and then you go down to fourth, and you go down to fifth, and fifth is home. There's something about the mode, right? Getting back to Heather Pollington's talk of this that completely changes the mechanics of everything in the game. There's other rules from the Massachusetts rule set that apply here that make this particular setup, more important. You can steal first base without even getting a hit. As long as they're not looking, you can just go. The ball is always live. It's never dead. So if you are really not the greatest hitter in the world, but you can run, great. You can get on base. And it's really easy to get on base in the beginning. But then the goal of the rest of the inning is to try and buy your runners enough time to get all the way around. So in the Massachusetts game, that would not have been as interesting, I guess. But because of a mathematical property that has its founding in a beautiful mode, if you will, in real life with the mechanics of this as a sport and as a game with objectives and the implications of that, that's where the mode actually does something here. So Brent and I have been playing this for about 7 years now. And this is something that has, an aesthetic and geometrical component to it that no one's thinking about while they're playing it, but they have no idea how much that actually governs why the game is as good as it is. So that level of like autistic like obsession with our approach to these things is not bad, right? Like getting all the way down to the nitty-gritty of how we're organizing and setting up um, events, demonstration, play, narration, recitation. These things can accompany them and make them better. So that's my attempt at a real life example of an integration from what Heather was talking about.
This is actually interesting because in some ways, I think, Cory, you mentioned that you had recently read Loris. Is that correct?
Amazing
That
book.
was
Yeah.
that you?
Yeah. A year and a half or
Yeah.
2 years ago, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a it's been a long time for me, but it's one of my favorite books of all time. Um, and I think I've read it. I think I've read it twice. It's one of those books that's really hard to remember. Kind of going through it, have I read it twice, or did I have to like go back and read again to like remember to be able to read it once? It's kind of
Hmm.
those things kind of blend in my brain. But
Yeah.
one of the big themes of that book is the tension between thinking vertically and living vertically and living horizontally. As like the main character Arsini, who is just like for much of his life, he's so focused on the here and now, on his, or actually in the early part of the story is where like he's so focused on his family, on his um like what on the fears and worries of what will happen to his wife and soon to be child, and like that's like where his entire focus is, and then the whole entire rest of the story is completely changing that frame of reference to be entirely vertical, to where it's no longer in the horizontal world, in the horizontal realm of what matters. It's all about something bigger beyond, about sacrifice, about Christ's sacrifice, and in a sense, letting go of this great burden that he's carried his entire life. Not wanting to ruin the story, as it's just truly an incredibly powerful story. Um, but I think of I think of that, and one of the interesting questions that you kind of have to ask at the end of that story um, is like what Loris or Arsini, the reality that he experiences at the end, and like this thing that he learns in a way of the like life is better lived vertically than it is horizontally, or life is better lived thinking on things above rather than things below, things in our horizontal gaze. Um, he ends up for much of the entire book um, living outside of the world around him. And he ends up being very disconnected from the world around him. A lot of people are very like he is almost a shocking person to encounter during certain aspects of this story, because he's become the holy fool, or he's like, I mean, you just have these wild moments where he's either so vertical or so out of it, or so disconnected from the horizontal. So this example, Grant, that you gave, I think there's something powerful, and it ties back to something that was said earlier too, of the importance of grounding grounding the bigger, broader ideas in an actual physical, real context, but then having these two things brought together. And I think we can get so keyed in on remember, 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 or memory, memory, memory. I think of there was being in Awana growing up as a kid, and how it's all centered around memorize Bible verses, memorize, 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 memorize. And to be honest, there's only a few that ever truly stuck, right? And like the memory aspect, that's great, but like for what? Like why? Why am I doing this? And I found it funny. I've tried to, so I also love the game of town ball, and I've tried to, like, how do I explain the game of town ball to people? And really, like, it's not, you don't. You get them out onto the field to play the game. But once they begin to love the game, you don't want them to just stay there. Like, you want to explain there's a reason why these things are the way they are. Like, did you notice the shape of the field? Did you notice how this is? Like, and starting to think further up and further into this game, to this way of playing. It's not, like the power of combining, like, that which is using Jonathan Pajot terms, just really broad, sometimes seemingly useless terms, combining what is above and what is below. Like, these two things need to be in union for a life to be lived out in its fullest. And our modern culture kind of, not modern, our present culture, there's a feeling of, like, a lack of wanting to, oh, the word is not coming. The lack of I keep wanting to go back to the word play. The lack of wanting to play with the things that are around us. And to not just to consume, not just to go, oh, that was such a good movie, I loved it, it made my, like, I laughed so much.
I'm so good at being a spectator.
Yeah, so good at being a
That's the
spectator.
critique. Yeah.
Oh, I loved watching that baseball game, but to never, like, pick up a ball themselves and throw, right? Or I thought that book was amazing. Well, what did you love about it? Oh, uh, it made me cry. And you're like, well, but why? Oh, I mean, I felt so, like, and it's like they never go beyond simply the feeling of the thing, because we don't allow ourselves to play with the ideas, or to engage the ideas. Man, do I feel like I've just gone everywhere in this little rant.
No, that was really helpful.
Bring me, like, yeah, take that, make it useful.
Grant, I don't know how I'm gonna have to get going here pretty soon. And the way that I normally like to end, if you're good with it, is re-invoke the protocol, and we'll go around the circle and give everybody a couple of minutes for closing thoughts, or for a summarization, or if you've got, stuff that you didn't get to say. And you guys can certainly keep going too, but I'm gonna have to get going here in a few minutes. Does that sound okay to you?
Same. Yeah, no, me too. That's good. John, Gerrit, anything?
Let me just so that I don't have the last word, but I want to pick up what Brent was saying for my last word, because when I was it occurred to me, I don't know if it was because I had that diagram of town ball in my head, but when you were describing Loris, I don't know if I heard somebody say this or if this is like an actual thing that's just like occurring to me. It's so funny how that don't know if this is my idea or someone else's. Loris, the story is interesting because it comes in epochs, like his life, and you notice when a new one starts because he changes his name. He changes his name several times, and it's almost like a circle. Like he comes back to where kind of he was at the beginning, but the dynamic isn't circular, like two-dimensional. And this is the thing that the Orthodox like to talk about in their metaphysics. It's a spiral dynamic, right? So you return to the same place, but if you look at it from the side, you're higher than you were before. So you're actually spiraling upward as you go through these cyclical patterns. And it seems to be the case with his life, with Arseni's life. And it's funny that it follows the same kind of like the spiral. You have the spiral and town ball. And that's what I was hearing you describe, Brent. And there was something else that I wanted to bring for the image. Oh, that's right, the vertical and the horizontal. So like, because you have these moments when Arseny is caught up in the vertical. Oh, it's so cool. But it's exactly like you said. The magic seems to happen, so to speak, when his focus on the vertical is brought out into his lived experience in chronological time with the people that he's around. An amazing thing, like miracles start happening, and everyone else, their attention is drawn to the beauty of him and the way he lives his life, because he's just now focused on the vertical, but fully participating in what's going on around him. And that collapse isn't the right word, but the participation, that's the right word, of the vertical with the horizontal brings those things together. And I think memory plays such a beautiful role in that. So I think what you said was very coherent, and I'm actually finding all this incredibly helpful and actually very pragmatic, especially as a father. But and how I'm going to change the way I live my life. But that's my closing thoughts. We'll we'll go. I guess Gerrit, Grant, John, and Brent is the order that I've got. So, Gerrit, closing thoughts.
All right. Well, as my first estuary, I really enjoyed this. And I do have a couple questions, and this is kind of a how-to. My first is about, if I'm going out of bounds in terms of relevance, is there a way that another person can just give me a little poke and say, you're missing it, or, that's not what we're talking about today, or something like that. If I'm going way off the rails and somebody just says the word relevance, and then I just shut my mouth so I stop embarrassing myself. I don't know if there's a protocol for that. I don't know if there's a boundary around the conversation at all. So I guess I'm kind of estuary illiterate.
Are you talking about an estuary?
Yeah. It's a meeting place. We got all kinds of interesting ideas that get thrust in. Sometimes it's the wildest ideas that end up being the most meaningful. So,
and it's a very, and this is the thing that I like about it too, is I actually use this as a kind of a teaching method in my previous job as well. I don't call it estuary, I call it something else. But part of what I always emphasize is it's not about the content. The content is not the purpose of what we're doing here. It's about feeling out something that's going on, that's invisible, that's between us. And so if somebody has something that's deeply relevant to them, that they feel was like a branching off point from where we've been talking, then if the group is vibing well, I'm sure there's much better language, then it should be a thing that's encouraged and invited and welcomed for somebody to go off on a rabbit trail. And because there's going to be a way to tie it back in. And, especially for people like, me, when I was very socially inept when I was younger, it's there does have to be a way for an estuary leader who's adept at these things to like help shepherd a little bit. Like if it's going way off the rails, and this is usually manifested if somebody's just talking way too much and talking over other people and like not engaging with other people's ideas, but just hyper focusing on their own ideas. Those sorts of things, you learn how to lead with a loose hand, and it's very difficult and it's very challenging. But that in and of itself, so like there's the skill of relating, but there's also the meta skill of like shepherding or midwifing a conversation, which anyone who's led an estuary group will be familiar with at some point. There's all sorts of crazy things that can happen. But what you're just describing, like in terms of content, like rabbit trails, all on, because you're expressing yourself, right? Like that's
good deal.
We're not here about the feelings, and it's not like, just express yourself, but it's a way that we can be hospitable to you to listen to what you have to say.
Sure. Okay, that's reassuring, because sometimes I'll have a trail that connects, but you won't realize how it's relevant until 3 minutes of talking has gone by. So that's good to know. Yeah, and I also wanted to say, Cory, that I found an Eastern Catholic church close to home, and I went to my first. It would be my second now, and it looks like it'll be my home church. So I have choir practice tomorrow, and we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you posted. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to reading Loris, because you guys are crazy about it, and looking into Charlotte Mason schools, because you guys are crazy about that too. And I might get back into teaching, and if I could do it in a way that I'm enthusiastic about it, that would be really special. So I appreciate it.
Praise God. I hope to hear more about that.
Garrett, where are you at?
In terms of my work, where I work, where I live?
Just big or broad, where are you located?
West Michigan.
Okay. There is a school out there, so might even just
all right.
send something your way. But yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks, Brent.
All right, Grant.
Or when you said midwifing in conversation, I was thinking like, wait, babe, the conversation doula isn't here. We can't talk yet. Hold up. Breathe. That whole subject is very funny. I have some very crunchy relatives that have opinions about that. Anyway, I do really like the gazebo thing, Gerrit. Like, let's go hard with that.
Okay, I thought it was cool. Yeah,
like that has legs. That has legs. So,
it would have to be constraints, though. Like, it can't just become creative. Look what I can do. It has to be, here's a work of art, and I'm gonna do it for you, and it's gonna take a couple minutes, and everyone's fully clothed, and like I said, things can devolve in like expressive spaces.
Oh dear.
You don't want the 12-year-old boy to just walk up, take off his shirt, and walk off.
It would not work here in Portland. It just would not.
No.
Oh, brother. Yeah, especially not this upcoming month. But no, that I think there's a lot there. It's scalable, it's travelable, it's replicable. It can start small and slow, which all good things do. I want to figure more about how that works. Wondering if there was any kind of synthesis in terms of how the mode of things affects what we do, but clearly it does. And yeah, I think there maybe is more to be said there, but yeah, I really appreciated the synthesis of the classroom examples that Brent brought up about how gratitude takes place in all this and is actually really the heart of memory in the end, in tying you back in the rumination and the digestion in the gut. I mean, I know that from personal experience too, of the effects of gratitude in that way. So I think the gratitude piece is one of the most important things to take home from today. So thank you.
Beautiful. John, closing thoughts.
I'm just thinking that just our conversation today is a good example of how to process, I mean, if you think about, we went to a shared experience, and then it lives in our memory now, and then we processed it together from our different points of view, and we were able to encourage each other and had some ideas on how to live it out. And everybody kind of latched onto those as it applied to them. And I just think as a practice, as a memory practice, or as a a gratitude practice, even just this time we spent together, just really valuable to me. I have a lot of thoughts and different. Now I see the conference and the content there even in a different way. So I have that different perspective, even like Heather's talk was talking about the art from a different perspective. So I don't know. I just really want to thank you guys, and I'm really thankful. I want to show my gratitude to you guys for the gift that you gave of yourselves and how that has changed my way of seeing. Really valuable. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Brent, close us out.
Yeah, I'm grateful for John's example of the power of prayer, and the kind of the unique, almost humorous aspect of that, and how there is something deeply tied to the role of prayer, and the life of the saints, and just thinking on that, and having to then my brain kind of turned in that direction a little bit as you were sharing that story and going, well, that makes like why people pray to the saints, that makes it make so much more sense. We are giving them breath in our world, in a sense. We are giving them, we are remembering them in a way that remembers them here and now. And like I do not come from a tradition that prays to the saints. However, I wonder if I see it in a different light because of this conversation. And particularly in the way that like the power of telling the lives of the saints, of praying and invoking them, actually how incredibly forming that can be, both for yourself and for your church body. So yeah, that's where my mind is now ruminating. So I'm grateful, John, for just for that little tidbit of a story. Got me thinking. So
Beautiful. This was amazing. Thank you all. Grant, thank you for hosting this and for getting this together. Your channel, if you want to close it out here.
Yeah. Thank you all. So glad to have these conversations and find ways to bring them into our local contexts, which kind of to briefly echo the kind of online and real distinction that Cory was talking about earlier. I even find it difficult to even have these kinds of conversations with my own family members sometimes, the people that I know the most and spend the most time with. Because I think at first they often come off as like a little too brainy, but like we have to have a common vocabulary for these things first in order to describe what we're doing. And I am so thankful that I am in a more high church Christian tradition as an Anglican, and that is a shared language my family understands that we can reference to explain a lot of everything else. And I'm increasingly realizing how much, the things I do with my loved ones in church, I want it to be the thing that explains the rest of life in the patterns as well, which means church itself has to be extremely patterned. So that's then a wonderful starting point for these kinds of conversations with my family and other people about how to incorporate these lived things we're talking about memory and community and everything related. So yeah, Brent, I will see you in like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Looking
Yeah,
forward to it.
yeah, in person. So all right, thank you all. Have a good
Thanks,
afternoon.
guys.
God bless
Good
you
morning,
guys.
friends. Nice to meet you, John and Brent. Good to see you, Cory
Pleasure.
and Grant. See you.
See ya.